Welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast, the show for people who want to live sustainably without the global overwhelm. We're here to lighten your environmental load. We celebrate local sustainability across Australia and connect you to the solutions and people already doing great things for a healthier planet. Living sustainably starts with good humans like you, people who care about the natural environment, our communities, and the everyday spaces we live in. Each conversation helps you feel reassured that living lighter on the planet is achievable and genuinely feels good to be a part of. From the lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people in Newcastle, Australia, join me, Marty Lee, as we explore how to consume less, build stronger community connections, and thrive in your neighbourhood, wherever you call home. Welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Hello, my name's Marty Lee and welcome to the ReNewy Living Podcast. Creating a beautiful, sustainably rich home doesn't need to be about cost or ticking the boxes to meet environmental requirements. It can also be about community and connection. In this episode, we're stepping outside the traditional building box to explore how it really can take a village to build a home. My guests are Rita Ordónez and James Compte from Shepherd's Ground, an eco-village and farm in Butterwick, New South Wales. Inspired by Rita's upbringing and a shared desire to tread lightly on the planet, their aim was to build a healthy, eco-friendly family home. Their journey featured on ABC's Grand Designs Australia, and it revealed the grit and challenges that come with DIY building. Now settled into their finished home, Rita and James share their experiences of building an intentional and sustainable home. G'day, Rita.
Hi, Marty. How are you?
Good, thank you. And g'day, James.
Hello.
It's so lovely to be sitting here at your dining table in your new house that you've only been in for 4 months. Tell us about your journey of how you got to this point.
We came back from living overseas and we always wanted to have a home in the countryside on a farm, but that wasn't possible because we weren't farmers. We are not farmers and we couldn't really look after a huge farm on our own. And so we also wanted our children to grow up near animals, near the forest, with friends to play. And so we looked around places in Australia and it was very expensive. And then we found this lovely place where it just felt right. Things just happened so easily for us that it was meant to be, I think.
Yeah, I think it's been quite a long journey. We've wanted to build our own home for a long time. And as Rita mentioned, the site that we built on was ideal for a number of reasons, and we're able to live on a rural farm setting and share that responsibility within a wider community. And I guess I grew up as the son of a builder and the grandson of a builder. In a strange way, I really didn't want to become a builder because I saw how hard, and physically demanding the job was. And I think the reality of how much it costs to have someone build a house for you meant that, I really needed to take a look at whether I'd be able to build a house myself. And having that background, being around house building a lot as a child and being able to, talk with my dad and have him on site or at the end of the telephone meant that it was a lot more, I guess, achievable than I first thought. And even right up to the point, I think, where we decided that we'd build it ourselves, I didn't quite believe that I'd be able to build a house. So it's interesting how necessity or the reality of the situation helps to shape what's possible.
But I also think it was always something that was in the back of our mind because when we were first together, James said one day I will build you a house. My dad is a builder. And this was when we first met. And I remember living overseas and we would watch Grand Designs. We always had a picture of a block of land we have in Ecuador. And we're like, one day we're going to do this. But I think it was always in the back of your mind to build something for us and our family, except it was maybe just a dream that was living there.
Yeah, that's right. It's nice to think back, that long ago, and probably what was going through my mind was I'd pay somebody to build a house for us. I don't think I literally thought I'd be doing the building myself, but yeah, it's exciting to have achieved that, something that you didn't quite believe would be possible.
There's something different about wanting to build your house or a dream home in a mainstream kind of way compared to the way that you've chosen and to be more sustainable and more eco-friendly. What was your philosophy or background in getting to that point of wanting to build but more sustainably?
For me, it started very early on. Growing up, my mum was very impressionable, I guess, in terms of building the values that I grew up with, led into, I guess, life decisions, with my career and with family life. We've, I think, always just taken risks and pursued the dream rather than, following, I guess, what you're meant to do with work and family life and things like that. And so there's always been an element of having a go at something and not being too dissuaded by doing something a little bit different or, something that your heart calls you to. And so when it came to building a house, I was really keen. I thought, there's only one opportunity probably in my lifetime where I'm going to build my own house. I didn't even think I would, but we got to that point. And I thought, well, this is my opportunity or our opportunity to do something a bit different and to, put into practice some of the things that we've dreamt about. Yeah, that just meant, practically speaking, trying experimental building materials, putting in place an interesting building philosophy, I think, and doing the project in a way that's a bit different to the standard house build in Australia in terms of, the way we were able to tap into all of the help that we received.
You took on really big challenges there. You decided to be a DIY builder, even though you had the background of your family, and then you chose to do it more sustainably as well. So, they're really big challenges to do. Rita, how did your upbringing influence your decisions in making this an eco-friendly home?
Well, for me, it was always going back to my childhood. I remember growing up in this lovely place in South America in a valley where my grandfather had a big block of land and he divided the land amongst his children. And so he built his house and my uncle, my auntie, my mom, everyone. So we all were together in a place that looked similar to Shepherd's. And so I remember seeing the mud brick houses being made, my uncle building the house, the pool. So for me, it was something that I always, I remember very clearly. And to me, it was just like, we have to have something like that in our place. I remember always telling James, we should do mud bricks or have something like that. And we always thought, oh, it's going to be hard work. And it seems like in a way we ended up coming back to our first ideas. So, in South America, we had different building experiences. So things are still very much handmade, if you like. We don't have the massive kit homes that you find here. And so for me, it was just something natural to build the way that we were hoping to do it. I remember said to James, we probably need to use all of our budget in windows because I love windows and we need to have plants. And that was always in a list. We had a clear vision of a one-story house and big windows and the warmth that you get from mud brick. But then we couldn't build a mud brick house. So then we had a steel frame house and then we had to think of ways to kind of recreate that feeling inside. So that's where you see with the rendered walls and the earthen floor and, the kitchen bench, all of that brings that idea of mud brick house, if you like. So
We, as a family, have a very close connection to Ecuador, which is where Rita's originally from. We lived there as a family for a while, and Celeste went to school there. Both Rita and I worked in Ecuador for a period of time. And so I also grew very close to the culture and some of the visual cues and the sensory, environment there. And so, yeah, certainly I think the colors we chose, like that really terracotta, light, earthy terracotta type color of the plaster on the walls inside, contrasts nicely with the rich, maybe chocolatey, you could say, color of the earthen floor. And then, right through to, we didn't do mud brick, but we did do compressed earth bricks for one of the feature walls in the study. And so, yeah, those were really intentional decisions to connect the house to both this environment here, because we use some very local materials from the site itself, but also to Rita's family background and culture.
It's a lovely merging of both of your backgrounds to have this finished product as part of that. So how about we have a bit of a tour of the house and we can go through some materials and design features that really resonate with you and that you absolutely love. We'll start with where we are. We're in the combined kitchen, dining and lounge room, which is a beautiful open space. It's got really high angled ceiling. What do you love about this room?
I think what I love is how it feels very lived in, and it feels, even just after being here for only 4 months, it doesn't have that new house feel to it at all. It feels like it has a soul to it. I guess everywhere we look, it reminds us of people that have contributed to the build process, friends that helped with the tiling, that helped with the earthen floor, friends that helped putting heavy recycled panels on the ceiling. And yeah, there's a whole lot of heart and soul that went into it. And I think this particular part of the house brings all of that together really nicely in a beautiful aesthetic way as well.
I love the walls. The walls are my favorite part of the house, just especially in this room where there's so much light and then you see the textures. And to me, it's like I would say like a reminder of watching or coming back after work and seeing James and my dad or other friends helping to render those walls. And if you look around, you can see the patterns almost. You can see the arms moving in circles. And I love the rounded edges and then the recycled timber on the windowsills. So I think my favorite part of this room is definitely the tall walls where we don't even want to put any paintings or anything because they're just so beautiful. And I think the color is great. So yeah, the walls are definitely my favorite.
I think the choice to use really natural, earthy materials as well meant, on the one hand, that they were quite forgiving. So as a first-time builder, I didn't have quite as much pressure, and it also, the aesthetic is not really like a clean, minimalistic look. It's a much more of a living type of earthy look, and in that sense, as Rita talks about the walls, they're not perfectly uniform. They're really unique. They have character, and yeah, I think that they blend in much more with the environment outside, which has character and is unique and living.
Rita, going back to when you say what you love about this room is the people who helped make and build this room. Your family doesn't live here close by.
That's right. My dad came 3 times.
From Ecuador?
Yes, he did. He came 3 times. And the first time he came, it was when we first started. And that was a bit stressful. He wasn't sure how it was going to work. And then the second time when the frames were up, he was like, oh, wow, this house is actually might end up working. So he was in charge of all the insulation. So all the houses, 90%, I would say, insulated by my dad. And then the third time, it was definitely, he was sure it was going to work out. Like he told me, oh, I think if a hurricane came, nothing is bringing this house down because I've seen how meticulous James is. Nothing is going to bring this house down. So yeah, my dad came 3 times and my mom came only once when we were living still in Newcastle. So she would help us a lot with cooking and cleaning and the laundry and looking after the plants and the animals that we had there. Well, we came here every day after work and stayed late, had dinner with James and my dad, and then drive back to Newcastle for, 45 minutes at night. And she was there waiting for us. So she helped in that way as well.
The thing that intrigues me the most, and we haven't moved out of the kitchen, dining, lounge room space, is the earthen floor. The first thought that I had is, how on earth do you clean an earthen floor? Now, you've been living here for 4 months. Tell us about the earthen floor and what's the pros and the cons about that and why you chose that.
Well, I think the first thing to mention was that while it was economical in terms of materials and I think light environmentally in terms of materials, it was a huge human labor cost. It was, a massive amount of materials that we needed to move and put in place to build up the various layers to an earthen floor. So what we see, this, I guess, again, it kind of looks like a living floor in a sense that it's not perfectly uniform in appearance. There's quite a few layers beneath that function for insulation and waterproofing and structure. At the end of the day, I think it's probably one of our favorite features of the house because it's just such a unique thing to experience walking on an earthen floor. It's really like walking outdoors barefoot, but in the comfort of your own house in a much, I don't know how to explain it, but a much cleaner outdoor floor.
Much cleaner. There's no dirt
Right.
because you've sealed it, and there's no bindies.
Yes.
So you don't have to worry about that either. But where did the earth come from for the floor?
It's a combination of clay from the local area, so just a few kilometres away, with local sand and local straw. And so there's a base coat that has straw in it, which is for, the tensile strength and to help prevent cracking. And then it has a thin skim layer on top with just the clay and sand. And yeah, there was just, we had a huge amount of help from family and friends with the earthen floor in particular, because each little, square meter of it needed to be compacted by hand and then troweled by hand and then, sealed by hand as well. And so, yeah, there's just, layers and layers of manual labor involved. But, that's all in the past now and we thoroughly enjoy the feel of it.
That phrase, you can enjoy the fruits of your labour, is definitely coming into effect, isn't it?
I think it's nice. Like when we first moved in, let's say the first night or something, when we were finally walking barefoot, I could have this feeling that I was walking kind of like in waves, or that the floor wasn't dry yet, because it's not straight and flat and perfect. I think when you look at it, it looks really level and it looks great. But when you walk on it, you can feel, I think, the organic life of the floor. So your feet feel nice. And for me, it's like sometimes walking on like, I don't know, the clouds or something, because there's some your feet, I guess, we're not used to it. And so, if you go on floorboards and nice and straight and flat and it's quite uniform. But here you have like nice little curves, if you like, that make it feel nice.
I like the word organic, and the other word I like is dynamic as well, because the house does have this very lived-in kind of feel, and it's very warm, such a warm feeling. And organic is great because like you've also used recycled timbers on your main very large timber bench, and that is very organic. It's even got the what do you call that? It's a vice, vice handle on it.
Yeah, the kitchen island bench was a lucky find. I mean, we really had an approach with the building philosophy of using non-toxic materials, but as much as possible, either recycled or recyclable materials. And so with a lot of the finishes, we tried to find recycled materials off, online marketplaces and, I guess antique shops or secondhand shops. And this kitchen island bench is quite big, and it was an old workbench that we installed on top of a base that I built out of lightweight sort of Hebel panels, and we were able to then plaster that with a Japanese plaster, Otsumigaki, I think is the name, and it gives it a really lovely, natural sort of finish, a bit like a clay finish, but it's a nice off-white color.
It is exactly like my grandmother's house used to be. So the windows in her house were like that. So when I saw it for the first time, I was like, this is it, it's perfect. So, and also you can see, but underneath the workbench, like the kitchen island, we used some of the leftover bricks that we made with James's dad and my dad. So,
yeah, that's a fascinating story because you did buy a brick making machine, didn't you? Like, and you can see that on Grand Designs. It's a whopper.
Yeah, and we made also some of those bricks, and they were really hard work. And so at the end, once we had those leftover bricks, we can't waste anything because they were so precious, and we worked so hard. And we just, as you can see, we had just enough to cover the wall of the backside of the bench. So. And it's like a nice reminder of, how hard that was, but at the same time, how we achieved something so beautiful.
And be able to use what you already had on site, what you were planning to use, and then you had your own leftovers and needed to incorporate that in a different kind of way.
I love in the kitchen also the lamps that you can see hanging nice and low from the ceiling. We bought them from an antique shop in Sydney, and they belonged to car factory in the UK. And that was also a bit of a mission for James to work out how we were going to hang them. As you can see, he had to add extra bits to the original lamps so they hung beautifully. And then I think the connections were different. Things wouldn't work. And then you have to think of creative ways of making it work. So I actually love those lamps because they fit perfectly with the vibe of the kitchen and the colors.
They do look really beautiful, but also that story just shows that there's this level of creativity that needs to go into a house that's not mainstreamed to the book, to the T. You have to think creatively and you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah, I think in our case, we had a broad vision of what we wanted to create, but we didn't have everything exactly clear from the beginning. And so there was a lot of creativity at the time when each step of the process needed to be completed. And I ended up learning a lot more than I ever dreamt I would about electrics and roughing in the electrics and connecting power points and light switches and doing plumbing work. And it was a huge learning curve, but very enjoyable on the whole.
As James said, we didn't have a clear idea, we're going to make it like this, or like that. But then, let's say we found a piece of, let's say the lamps, and then we made the house work around that, or the workbench. And then it was like creating the house. We created every room or every place that you see, slowly and mindfully. And I think it was a process that happened so beautifully. And then at the end, it was in harmony with the house, because I think we had a vision, but it was more like in our hearts or in our mind rather than on paper.
For that vision to happen to begin with, you had an architect design the house. And then so what you were saying just now is for the kitchen bench or whatever else needed to happen, it came within that foundational of you had the framework of your house, like the paper side of the framework, not the physical framework. And then you could work within that.
Yeah, I think we were really fortunate with our architect, Morton Pettis, and he was not only an architect, but, a friend. He provided advice along the way, and he came and did, a whole bunch of different bits of work. He's a very handy architect, and yeah, just an endless fountain of knowledge and advice. And I guess, yeah, because of our limited budget, we engaged him in the beginning to do the plans that were required for council. And then, yeah, we didn't get a complete set of very detailed plans. So that's where we had a bit of freedom to create on the go.
I think what was great also that Morten always encouraged us to pursue these risky, out-of-the-box type of projects like the tiles. He was like, yes, you can make that work. Yes, do it. Or the mezzanine, or even, I remember the first time we had a talk, I had found these lovely old doors on Marketplace, on the internet, and he's like, okay, then let's build a frame around the door. And so he was always so excited to see what we had in mind, because I think he's an artist as well. He was probably a bit more outside the box than we were. So that was really, really awesome. So yeah, it was really nice to have a lot of people like that along the way, that if we had an idea, they helped us to make it happen. So we can take you around the garden and talk about the rocks. So there was always someone willing to help you be part of your dream or accomplish that little bit of a caprice that you had. And yeah, it was really, really cool.
I think one of the, interesting or fun things about the house is the real number of different building materials we used. And so, yeah, it was probably challenging for Morten, our architect, but also fun for him to work with us on all of the different materials. We started off with, a steel frame, and that perhaps doesn't sound that ecological, but we really didn't want to use any treated timber in the house because it's a really toxic material that's used to treat the timber, and it doesn't end up degrading at the end of life. And so a steel frame is something that's endlessly recyclable. But then that set us off on a path with all sorts of challenges because, steel frames can be challenging with thermal bridging and the heating and the cooling effect that they have. And so that's where we used, we really wrapped the entire frame in wood fiber, which is an incredible product because of its insulating, biodegradable properties of it. And then that meant that we, in terms of the inside of the house, we had this interesting surface that we then had to work with. So we didn't have a typical stud frame with gyprock that we would just paint. For example, we had wood fiber, which is really suited to plaster or render. And so that gave us then the opportunity to do a beautiful plaster finish on the inside, which really brings the house to life. I think we did have some walls, the internal walls, which aligned with this save board material, which is a really innovative post-consumer waste it's made from. And, we chose to paint that with a natural paint. So there's a really wonderful paint shop in Sydney called Peter Lewis Paints. And Peter Lewis was the founder of Porter's Paints. And he, after selling that, spent some time in Italy and learned all about traditional natural paints and brought that back to Australia with his new business. And so these are all completely natural paints, which is so hard to find. Even when we talk about low or zero VOC paints, they still contain all sorts of materials that we wouldn't know how to pronounce the name of. And so, yeah, with these paints, we chose a lime fresco. And so it has a consistency a bit like toothpaste, and it's troweled on. And so, that was another surface that I ended up troweling, not just the floors, but the walls. With the ceiling, we chose to use a really interesting paint from a company called Diasen, which is distributed by Cork Spray Australia. And so it has this beautiful texture to it, a very fine, grainy sort of texture to it. And we wanted that because it gave, a bit of profile to the roof. It also helped to cover some inconsistencies. And so that's a natural cork base paint. So all of those fine grains that we see are just, thousands and thousands of little cork particles. We used a cork screed for the middle part of the house, which is a really interesting material. It's made from cork particles, diatomaceous earth, and lime, and it's got a really great insulating property and temperature regulating property. We use cork facade on part of the outside of the house, and so that was a really interesting product to use as well. It's aesthetically, it's really beautiful. You get all the texture of
in our bathroom as well, the cork tiles. Let's see how you feel about those tiles.
Let's go and feel the cork tiles, because I do like cork. I grew up in a house that had cork on the kitchen floor, and I love it. It feels so good. So let's go test that out.
The decision to use cork was, I guess, twofold. We didn't like traditional tiles with the grouting and the cold feel on your feet. And then using cork, I guess, was an easy installation and has just a nice aesthetic to it as well.
We have the cork floor down there in the shower as well.
So we're actually standing in the bathroom now, so that's why it sounds slightly different to the kitchen area, not too echoey, which is different for a bathroom, isn't it? But the cork colouring and pattern does look a little bit like, perhaps, is it called an Angofra tree, like a gum tree? It looks very gum tree like.
I was reading the name of it on the website, and it's the desert.
Oh, the desert, right.
And it's the red, can't remember the name, it's like but the bush, the outback. Feels nice. What do you think?
I think it feels amazing, because we've still got our bare feet. It feels amazing. And then you were saying that there's cork in the shower.
Yeah, in the shower recess itself, it's a cork screed, which, it's a nice soft surface, and we just coated it with a natural waterproofing. Just, again, another interesting material to experiment with.
These doors, all the doors in the house were donated by a friend. So everyone wanted to help and contribute, and I think adds extra character to the house. Even though we haven't finished sanding them, I think they look great.
It's just beautiful. It feels so lovely. And so this is another door that you've got, that it's different to the door that we've just seen that's to the bathroom, but it still fits in aesthetically.
And I think everything we have has a history, like the doors belonged to a different house in a different context, and like everything else in the house. Like if you look here in the pantry, which is a mess, talking to people about a vision, telling them about a project, and people always being excited and wanting to hear, even though when we bought pieces of furniture, like in the bathroom, you saw the vanity, the lady was like, oh, my dad made these, and he was so excited. So we'll tell them, don't worry, we're going to reuse it.
So the vanity is like an old cupboard?
An
old sideboard of sorts?
Yeah, and when we bought it, for example, the lady was telling us, my dad was proud about this. It's like a family heirloom, but I can't have it anymore. So every little bit of furniture, I think, had a bit of history, and it was nice to prolong the life of things.
I think it also just goes to show how valuable relationships and connections are. You're in an eco-village. It's like a hyper-focused community of people that have got similar values, and they all want to see you thrive and shine.
Yeah, there's no way we could have pulled off this project if we were building in, suburbia or on a rural site, sort of out on our own. You just don't have that connectivity with a group of people who, in our case, had built a house, themselves, for example. So there would be, half a dozen or a dozen other families here who've been involved in building their entire house or parts of it. There were tools I could borrow at the last minute, or, materials that, would be lent or borrowed and things like that. And just that sense that you're not alone was huge, because there were some days where I would be plodding away on my own, but I still had this sense that, I'm part of something bigger and there's support around me.
I wish I could have a picture that I could really share with my family and friends, or people that ask us about the house, of the weekend before Grand Designs came. We had weekend working bee. Everyone came. Many of our neighbors coming really early in the morning to help. And there were moments when I was crying, thinking, how are we going to make this happen? And people just turn up. We had our neighbors doing the paving outside, landscaping, cleaning windows. Everyone came to help. And there's no way we could have done this on our own. We have friends helping us to, dig the hole for the tree or clean the windows. Someone else was cooking for everyone else. So it was a type of love and generosity that I haven't felt before, more than sometimes you expect from your closest family or friends. So that's something really, I think, valuable. And then a huge part of building this house that you don't see it, but we know how it was. And it's just a lovely thing to have and to feel.
Would you recommend for other people to build a house like you've built a house, knowing that there's always been these challenges, but at the moment you are just, this is the ultimate solution. This is for you. This is it, and you're enjoying it. But would you recommend it?
I guess it would appeal to certain people and not to others. I mean, I think in the sense of living in an intentional community or an eco-village, there's lots of pros, but there's lots of considerations or things, that are different to what we've grown accustomed to over the last few generations. And so I feel like it's probably what living was like, for our grandparents or great-grandparents when they were growing up, where you relied more on people in your immediate community for help and support, and you offered that. I think that's one of the great benefits of living in a community like this is that, for better or worse, at different times, you still have that human connection, that human touch, which is so precious, and often in the traditional sense now is so hard to weave into your life because we're so busy with everything. But in our case, living here, it's sort of foundational, or it's part of the fabric, and so we don't have to work very hard for it. Yeah, I think for it to work in our case, I guess we approached living in this type of setup as open-mindedly as possible and without too many expectations. I feel like if you come into something thinking it's going to be amazing, incredible, the answer to all of your dreams, then you might get let down. And so, we approached it, I think, with a much simpler sort of outlook.
For me, if you could get all the feelings that I got, all the ups, all the downs, all the days that were really hard, all the days that were so good, the feeling that you get when you're in the house, all the things that we've learned, watching James do all the things that he's done, all the late nights, really not having the capacity to think clearly for a whole year. And, the combination of work and home and all of that. And I would definitely tell you, do it. Because I wasn't building the house physically. Most of the time I wasn't. I did help. But to me, to see the whole process, to see all the people involved, to watch you, James, build the place and make things happen and really challenge yourself. Like, to me, if I could say, you get to experience all the things that I experienced the same way that I did, I would say, yes, do it.
You were there as a support person, though, because for your family, and you've got 2 children, for your family to thrive and function and for James to do his job physically at the house, your role was just as important. And that shows also that power of community.
Yeah, definitely. But I also think it changed us in so many ways. Not only us that live in here, I feel my dad changed. With my mom, my relationship has always been great. Same with my dad, but I feel it changed him. He's part of the community, even though he's not here. I love, and, the kids saw their father building something huge, and seeing that, hard, beautiful things come with hard work. And, I have my colleagues at work being so understanding and patient. And, it's really a huge community that was part of this. And I think for me, that's incredible.
From my perspective, I guess, looking at this whole journey, it has been incredible and largely very rewarding. I think that when I guess, took on the idea or the decision to build it, I never could have known how much was involved, how much work or detail or learning. And so that's something I think to keep in mind. Yeah, it's just somehow it's far bigger than you can imagine. For me, I guess a perspective of being the one, let's say, carrying the build side of the project through. Rita certainly kept the whole family functioning and connected. For me, there was, I guess, this transition, which was has been quite challenging, from wrapping up the building process to then somehow transitioning back into normal life. And yeah, I found that particularly difficult, and I understand. Someone told me that there's a word, I think, in German for this process of being an owner-builder to then finishing and trying to move on with your life. And it's, it's quite difficult because I had every fiber of my being, I guess, dedicated to this goal or this project for 2 and a bit years. And then day after the filming of the Grand Design's reveal, I just put down all the tools and I didn't want to look at a tool again. And so it's kind of like a very abrupt end to something that you're so passionately and deeply engaged in. I don't know how healthy that is to go from 150% to zero overnight. And so that's been, I think, a challenge and something to keep in mind, I guess, for people that are considering.
I've heard it could be a little bit similar to people approaching retirement, where they've worked 100% of their life full-time the whole time, and then suddenly they're at retirement and they've got nothing to do, or they don't have any other interests or not involved in. But you have had a bit of a softener since finishing the house with finding some work.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. And yeah, I'm fortunate now to be in a marketing role with the company as of last month, and really enjoying, I guess, that sense of continuity with, passion that I've developed around natural building, and being able to put some of my, let's say, prior or traditional skills around marketing into practice in this new area.
And now you've got that first-hand experience of knowing what the product is like, how to use it. That is something that's wonderful that comes out of it. And I think it also shows that the community has helped you a lot, and being part of a community is always give and take. And so that is one element of how you can give back to the community in a different kind of way.
Yeah, no, I think we've always approached these sorts of things in life with an openness and somehow a trust that, things will come together somehow. And so, that's a great example of how, I guess I put myself out there saying I'd be interested in work, and, followed up a few times, and then at the appropriate time, that opportunity came through. And it's great to be able to, I've always worked in areas in my career that I really connect with on a values level. And so this is another example where I'm able to work with a natural building product that really enhances the health of the building and the building inhabitants.
So it took you 2 years or so to build the house as an owner builder, which seems like a long time. And when you talk about the cost, the total cost of what it costs to build your house, it is that whole thick balance of the cost, time, community. It all sort of pays off in different kind of ways.
When you look at it at a very surface level, 2 years and a few months and just over $300,000 in expenses, it doesn't really paint the true picture. I think there's a lot more context to that, which is helpful to understand. So first of all, we engaged very few contractors in the build process, mostly because of the budget constraints. And so the total cost of, just over $300,000 meant that we were doing the far majority of the labor ourselves. And if we had have paid in a traditional build for the labor, then, that's often about 50% of the build cost. And so we'd be looking at a house that might have cost us, $700,000-800,000, even with me doing the project management and all of that. It also meant that because, I did the project management, I was also sourcing all of the materials. And so we weren't paying a markup that a builder would traditionally put so that they were able to, meet their costs and profit. I was able to negotiate with suppliers and compare costs, which typically a builder doesn't have the time or incentive to do. And so we were able to save money there. I think because we were using a lot of recycled materials and natural materials, we also found cost savings there. And then, just working in the context of a community meant that we had, labor that was offered quite often, even through, Rita's school community, our family, of course. Yeah, there was a lot of contribution there that isn't represented in those numbers.
Yeah, in the total expenditure cost, yeah. When you sourced your materials, yes, you sourced lots of pre-loved, secondhand, and you looked at materials that were more sustainably focused. But did having things come locally or from your local area, how important was that to you? Did that play a factor in your build?
I think for me, I set out with a whole bunch of ideals and I worked very hard to stick to those throughout the build, but they weren't always possible to hold on to 100%. So there would be examples where we purchased, let's say, the wood fiber panels that come from Europe. They're manufactured in Europe, so they need to be shipped over. But they were so critical to the health of the house and ensuring that it was breathable and vapor permeable, and we didn't have thermal bridging happening with the steel frame, things like that. But then there were lots of other examples where we really bought locally as much as possible. I think another thing that was essential in being a owner builder was having my own ute, or my dad actually gave me his old ute initially, and when that one gave up the ghost, we got another ute. But that meant that I could save on a lot of logistics and delivery costs by picking things up myself. I think as much as possible we tried to use local materials. That was definitely a factor.
I think another really great thing about buying secondhand things was that we didn't have any waste, like cardboard or plastic or styrofoam, and that may create a lot of waste. And I think even though we had to make quite a few trips to, the tip, or we didn't have as much waste as you would imagine, because we were quite mindful about that too.
Because I have read, and I can't remember what the actual stats are, but building and construction waste is a massive waste stream that happens. So that is like an absolute win.
And we still have the soft plastics like stored somewhere, hoping to take them back to Sydney, to the place where we got the panels that they use recycled plastic. So we were mindful, kind of being conscious about that and making an effort.
One of the interesting materials that Rita's referring to is a company called Saveboard. And I actually went and visited the factory and we took some soft plastics there. And what they do is they take landfill or materials, plastics and board, like cardboard type materials, that are destined to go into landfill, and they convert them into boards, which are a bit like plasterboard, if you like. That's how they're used in that sense. And they use the soft plastics as a binder and the carton type materials as an alternative to wood or timber. And they're extremely tough and resilient boards, and we ended up using them to line our ceiling and our internal dividing walls. And it's great. I think, when I went there, I just was blown away by how much material they're saving that would end up in landfill.
Thank you for sharing that. I had totally forgotten about how much waste is generated. And when you go past a normal house that's been built and the skip bin that gets filled and then emptied and filled all the time. And I'm sure that there's a way that some people can reuse things, but I'm glad that for your build that you found ways to repurpose or reuse or dispose of it in better ways. Is your house totally off-grid, and what kind of septic or sewer system, water system do you have? I mean, that's a big component about living in an eco-village. Now, this eco-village is just sort of outside of Maitland in New South Wales, which is not very far away. It's the closest urban town.
Yeah, that's right. So the house is entirely off-grid in the sense that we generate our own electricity with solar, and we're hoping also to use some new technologies that will work, 24/7 or on cloudy days. We collect our own rainwater, and so we have rainwater tanks and a filter system. And then we have composting or dry toilets, which, to be honest, is probably the only thing I would say that gives this house away as being off-grid, because when you live in a house like this, I don't think you would even notice that the power is generated through solar. You wouldn't notice that the water is rainwater. In fact, you might notice that because it tastes so much better than town water. But yeah, the dry toilet or the composting toilet is a main difference, and it's a huge water saving tool, I guess, which is great. But it does require a little bit of, maintenance.
It does require a bit of skill. But what I like about those composting toilets is you're not announcing to the house that you're going to the toilet, because with a flushing toilet, it's like everyone can hear that you've been to the toilet because you flushed it. But in a composting toilet, you can do it subtly.
Yeah, but then, when we have guests, comes the demonstration. And everyone is like, oh my gosh, so scared. But then it's just like, we have
if you follow the rules,
we just kind of have to show people, this is how you do it.
Living here, it becomes very routine and normal, and there's no smell or anything like that. It's just, it's a little bit odd the first few times, I guess.
But, I've been thinking, let's invite people and let's have a party, And to be honest, the only thing I'm worried is like, I worry if people are going to worry about going to the toilet, because it's not huge, but it's different for people. And even, sometimes little kids come and they say, are we going to fall? But it looks like a normal bath toilet, except you just have to be mindful of how you do it.
And it's like you still have the conveniences here, but it's just slightly different. And like your house, it's not mainstream, but it's very possible.
Yeah, it's totally achievable, and it is a really wonderful feeling not to receive water, electricity, gas bills in your email or in the post.
And then when the storm comes and when it rains, you really appreciate it. That's so good. And we collecting our own water. Sometimes if we just had a massive rain, that you can have an extra long shower without worrying or the water bill or, so it feels really good that you are contributing to doing something positive. And we haven't run out of electricity or power or anything. So it's really great.
Thanks, Rita and James, for your time today. This conversation has been so interesting and very insightful. What is one simple tip that you have to encourage listeners to build their own eco-friendly and intentional home?
I would just say that if you feel you have the resilience and the energy, that it's totally possible. You just have to get started.
And my tip would be, don't be scared or to ask for help, because you will be surprised to see how much people are willing to help. And sometimes I think we're embarrassed to ask for help or to borrow a tool or whatever it is. Just ask for help or share your thoughts and feelings with people, because you'll be surprised by the generosity and care that people have. So that's my tip.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the ReNewy Living Podcast. I hope you're feeling more confident and invigorated about taking a localised approach to living sustainably. Head over to my website, renewyliving.com.au, for this episode's summary and the relevant links. My ask to you is to follow or subscribe to the ReNewy Living Podcast so you can tune in to every episode. And by sharing the episodes you love, it's an easy way to help more people join the conversation about sustainability. I look forward to sharing more stories with you, ones that help lighten your environmental load and feel great to be a part of, so we can build a healthier planet for good. In people and planet kindness, from me, Marty Lee, this is the ReNewy Living Podcast.